It was the most uneventful planetary expulsion vote in Council history. No drama, no protests, no fist-slamming. Just a polite, ceremonial purging of an unstable member species. We've done it before, usually to primitive civilizations that failed to meet their quotas or invaded each other too enthusiastically. But this time, the species we expelled was Earth. Earth. Humans. There was a mild tremor of unease when the vote was first proposed. Some members, the softer, more sentimental ones, recalled the humans' emotional depth, their passion, their unpredictability. I call it disorder with good PR. The Zathari, my people, know better than to be swayed by poetic speeches or watery eyes. Protocol is order, and Earth had no respect for either. They refused to comply with subspace trade transparency laws. They mocked our dress protocols. They once sent a representative who wore a black suit with a red tie to a funeral summit. A tie. We wear mourning sashes woven from the silk of Nebulon death moths. But no, Ambassador Elias Hera wore a tie. The council chamber gasped. He yawned. That was 3 cycles ago. Now the final tally glowed above our heads in perfect, neutral white. Expulsion confirmed, effective immediately. The humans didn't flinch, not the way I expected anyway. Ambassador Harrow stood, adjusted his jacket, and, I swear this happened, winked at the Kareth delegate before turning to leave. No protest, no shouting, no threats, just a wink. The chamber buzzed with relief and mild laughter as he vanished through the exit. No one noticed the glint in his eye, or if they did, they chalked it up to human dramatics. Always a flair for the cinematic, those mammals. Later that evening, I attended the post-vote reception. There was a certain lightness in the air, the smug self-congratulation of beings who believed they had averted some kind of cultural contamination. Earth was gone, expelled like an inconvenient parasite, and the galaxy would be better for it. I sipped my fermented stardust tea and felt the weight of self-satisfaction settle in. Of course, we'd never actually feared the humans. They were small, short-lived, driven by hormones and mythology. They fought among themselves. They barely had control over their own moon. Yes, their military capabilities were unsettlingly creative. But creativity was not power, or so we believed. We believed a lot of things then. 3 rotations. That's how long it took for the celebration to wear off. The news of Earth's expulsion made its rounds through galactic channels, news feeds, and low-orbit taverns. The reactions were mostly consistent. Polite approval, occasional snickering, and the collective shrug of species who assumed the humans would either beg to return or quietly implode. But humanity did neither. They simply vanished. No calls, no protests, no smug messages riddled with idioms no translator could parse. They withdrew from every known diplomatic relay. Embassies across council space closed one by one. Lights off, doors sealed, AI systems offline. They left behind no statements, no warnings, only silence. I sent a message to our Zathari consulate on Mars, just a routine inquiry. It returned with an automated bounce. This channel no longer exists under Galactic Communications Protocol, which was curious because only the Council could revoke those protocols, and the Council hadn't done anything. Or so they said. The humans didn't just sever ties, they amputated them, and they did it with surgical precision. What's more unsettling than a shouting human? A quiet one. There's a reason their ancient dramas begin with angry speeches and end with someone calmly walking away from a burning building. By the second cycle, the Karashi trade ring reported unusual shipping voids along the outer spiral routes. Small, unregistered ships were being spotted, never engaging, never broadcasting, just observing, watching. And when hailed, they did not reply. "Scavengers," the council said. "Remnants, not worth concern." On the 6th cycle, a mining outpost on Dervan 4 went dark. Power failures happen, of course. Solar flares, gravitational anomalies, the occasional drunken technician falling into the main grid. But when a second station blinked out 2 rotations later, and then a third, always near known human-colonized systems, some of us began to whisper. Not loudly, just enough to hear our own unease echo back at us. A classified report reached my terminal, A Zathari survey drone had picked up a transmission near the old Terran frontier. It wasn't encoded, just heavily modulated and archaic. Audio only. Repeating in a loop, "Out of sight is not out of mind. We are building. We are watching. We are remembering." It wasn't signed, but the voice? It was Harrow's. I brought the matter to the Council's attention. Their response was a diplomatic pat on the head. "Valjean," said Chancellor Amrex of the Vaxari, his voice slick as boiled oil, "you're letting your imagination run wild. Humans are many things, but covert, please. They practically announce their every plan in song. That's the thing about humans. When they go quiet, something is always about to happen. They don't need overt threats. They write them between the lines." On the 12th cycle, the Galdurian colony of Trash 11 requested military aid. The message was fragmented, panicked. Unknown contact, technology unfamiliar, requesting assistance, and then static. The colony was gone by the time the nearest patrol ship arrived. No wreckage, no distress beacon, no signs of battle, just a single black flag left hovering in geosynchronous orbit. It bore one word, in Terran Standard, "Noted." I remember the exact moment my unease crystallized into fear. It was during a diplomatic review session on the 7th moon of Korun, a peaceful, swamp-slick satellite known mostly for its fungal wines and overgrown treaties. I had been assigned as overseer to the regional negotiations between the Council and the Arvani people. The Arvani, to their credit, had always been obedient, cautious, subservient in that particular way that weak civilizations learn, a legacy of survival through silence. But this time they weren't interested in signing the trade agreement. "We have a better offer," said Elder Tovek, his 3 eye stalks twitching in unison. My translator buzzed in confusion. "I'm sorry. A better offer than guaranteed trade security, council protection, and hyperlane maintenance?" He nodded, slowly, like someone who had been waiting to say it. "The humans reached out," he said plainly. I laughed, not politely, not diplomatically. I laughed. The entire chamber froze. "You mean the same humans the Council expelled?" I said, recovering. "The ones who left without a word, whose ships are now ghosts in our sensor data? Those humans?" "Yes," said Tovek. "They offered no threats, only a pact. The document was already signed. That fact alone nearly gave me cardiac arrhythmia in 2 of my 4 hearts. They called it the Pact of Mutual Autonomy, a compact drawn in precise Terran legalese, bound by biometric seals and confirmed through triple-spectrum encryption. It guaranteed the Arvani sovereignty, technological assistance, and, this was the strangest clause, an education program in crisis response and adaptive innovation. That last part was underlined. "Why would you sign such a thing?" I asked, trying not to let my voice crack. Tovek's reply chilled me more than anything else I had yet heard. "Because they asked what we needed, not what they could take." Humans had always been aggressive negotiators, emotional debaters, fond of ultimatums and poetic threats. But this was terrifying in its civility. They weren't demanding. They were listening. In the following rotations, whispers spread. The Glintari Confederacy began withdrawing from trade deals, citing restructuring. A faction of the Rytal diplomats requested full independence from council oversight. And then came the unmistakable confirmation. A series of new space stations, modular, elegant, and unmistakably human in design, began appearing along old Terran trade routes. No registry, no origin logs, but every one of them was guarded, and at the center of them all was the sigil of a phoenix. Not the Earth Eagle, not any council-recognized symbol, just a flaming bird, rising. When I finally returned to council space, I brought my findings before the assembly. "I believe the humans are forming something," I said carefully. "A rebellion?" Someone scoffed. "No," I said, "a replacement. It's one thing to lose control of a sector. It's another to lose control of the narrative, and the humans were stealing the story out from under us with surgical elegance. Not with fire and warships. No, that would have been easier to counter. But with whispered invitations and untraceable agreements, sealed in private between civilizations we once considered obedient. The Council didn't see it, not truly. They saw data points, isolated incidents, fringe anomalies. I saw something else: coordination. By the 14th cycle, the Pact of Karun had 6 signatories. By the 19th, that number had tripled. They called themselves the Independents, not a military coalition, not even a political bloc, just a collective of sovereign worlds with shared defense interests. The phrase was so bland, so wonderfully bureaucratic, that half the council never read past the second sentence. But I did, and I recognized the pattern. Each member of this collective had something in common. They'd been ignored, neglected, or outright exploited by the Galactic Council. Their complaints dismissed as logistical noise, their protection minimal, their requests shelved behind layers of diplomatic red tape. Humanity wasn't recruiting. They were giving these worlds something we never did: attention. And worse, they were offering options. I sent a dispatch to the Central Diplomatic Archives demanding deeper investigation into these so-called peace stations humans had constructed along the spiral rim. The reply came back flagged for clearance override. Access denied. Subject classified under Directive 12. Directive 12. That phrase hadn't been used since the Vuxen Rebellion. It meant the matter was no longer diplomatic. It was military intelligence. That's when I knew. We weren't the ones watching the humans anymore. They were watching us. Then came the incident on Delvaxis 9. A transport vessel belonging to a neutral trader house passed too close to one of the human stations, purely by accident, if the records are to be believed. The vessel was hailed, repeatedly, ignored the signals. When it drifted into restricted space, the station's defense grid activated. But it didn't fire. Instead, it issued a message, one that left the entire High Assembly in stunned silence. This zone is under sovereign protection by the Earth-aligned Autonomy Charter. Intrusions will be met with proportional response. We are not hostile, but we are not unarmed. We are not hostile, but we are not unarmed. It wasn't a warning. It was a boundary. One that humans had quietly drawn and dared us to cross. But no one wanted to be the first to test that line. That same week, our intelligence network detected the quiet rerouting of hundreds of civilian vessels, all altering course away from Council-controlled space and toward independent sectors. No official announcement, just migration. And then the whispers began. Not from humans, from our own people, the janitors of the Grand Council Tower, the maintenance drones, the translators, the junior envoys, low-ranking officials in forgotten departments. Why don't we have what they're building? It wasn't a revolution, it was an erosion. The humans hadn't attacked us. They'd made us irrelevant. You would think it would take a war. It didn't. It took a meeting. An emergency closed-door session of the Council's Security Council. A glorified name for an increasingly desperate group of species who believed in bureaucracy the way humans believe in divine judgment. I was summoned as an observer, not a participant. That, too, was telling. Grand Marshal Virat of the Krasian Dominion slammed her claw against the obsidian table. "We need to send a message," she hissed. "Message to whom?" I asked dryly. "The humans don't answer our comms anymore." "Exactly," she said, fangs flashing. "They've gone dark. That's a threat in itself." Someone else, a diplomat from the Hresh, muttered, "It's been over 30 cycles, not a single missile, not even a trade blockade." "Yes," Virat growled, "because they're smart. They want us to look weak. And so far, we are doing a magnificent job obliging." It was then she proposed Protocol 7 Red, a military maneuver, dressed up in diplomatic lace. A strike, not on Earth directly? Oh no, that would be too obvious. No, the Krasian fleet would investigate a human-aligned station in the neutral Morrigan corridor. Show strength, reclaim territory, reassure the Council that order still meant something. The vote passed. I abstained. Not out of cowardice, but out of foreboding. It took 3 cycles for the Krasian fleet, 16 warships, 2 dreadnoughts, and a command carrier, to reach the Morrigan corridor. It took 47 minutes for all of them to vanish. No distress call, no debris, no survivors, just another message. This one transmitted in perfect Krasian military frequency, using their own encryption protocols. We warned you. We do not want war, but we will not be touched. The feed ended with a single frame, the same Phoenix sigil. This time, it was pulsing. That was the moment panic began, not in the assembly. They still pretended, still postured. But beneath them, in the hallways, in the data silos, in the minds of every strategist and captain, the truth burned like a silent fire. We had miscalculated. The humans hadn't just built stations. They had built weapons, invisible, adaptive, possibly autonomous, or worse, manned. I pulled strings, old ones, risked blacklisting, dishonor, even exile. I reached out to a retired scout who once served near Sol before it was quarantined. He sent me a single phrase before deleting the channel. They never stopped preparing. They just stopped pretending. That night, I received an anonymous package, untraceable origin, quantum locked. Inside was a single data slate. It contained blueprints, human blueprints, not stolen council tech, not reverse-engineered scraps, original designs, clean, efficient, advanced. The title header was written in English. Earthspace, Generation 6 Strategic Infrastructure, Phase 1 complete. Phase 1. I barely slept. Not because I feared what came next, because I no longer believed we could stop it. Maps are not made to record truth. They're made to project authority. They tell us who owns what, who patrols where, which color dominates which star system. And most importantly, where the lines are, the borders we are taught not to cross. In the 51st cycle since the Council was founded, the maps began to bleed. The Crazian Dominion, once a wall of crimson across the southern galactic arms, quietly began redacting its patrol zones. The Valeth Enclave removed several sectors from their claim registry. Entire hyperlanes were marked under evaluation, but they weren't lost to war, they were abandoned. And those empty spaces, once gray, forgotten voids, began filling with new symbols, phoenixes, blue stars, soft white rings. Civilizations we had never heard of began appearing on diplomatic registries, the Tyrox Compact, the Eridan Treaty, the Free Belt of Nisalis. When I traced their communications origin, it all led back to Earth, or whatever Earth had become. It was no longer a single planet. It had become a hub, a beating heart, pumping out sovereignty like oxygen to every race that had ever been ignored by the Council. I attended a cartography briefing in Sector 12, a minor department that suddenly found itself at the center of political chaos. The lead analyst, a soft-spoken Bralexi named Varn, stood before the latest simulation. "These aren't annexations," he said. "They're alignments, voluntary, coordinated through encrypted quantum exchanges we can't intercept. They're moving faster than our bureaucracy can register." "Then why call this a threat?" asked one of the traditionalists, still clinging to old rules like they were holy text. "There's no war, no battles." Varn didn't blink. "That's the threat." I stayed behind after the briefing, asked him what no one else dared. "Have we lost control of the galaxy?" "No," he replied, staring at the map. "We gave it away, and someone else picked it up." Later that cycle, I met with an old contact, a Draxi courier who specialized in encrypted diplomatic transfers. She handed me a simple black data crystal, unmarked. "It's everywhere now," she said. "They don't even need to convince people. They just exist, and that's enough." I inserted the crystal into a secured terminal. It displayed a speech, a short one, not a broadcast, not a propaganda reel, just Elias Harrow, the same human ambassador who once wore a suit and red tie to our funeral summit, sitting alone at a table, hands folded. "We did not ask to lead. We were not built to rule, but we remember what it's like to be ignored, to be dismissed, to be called dangerous, not because we were violent, but because we refused to be small. You expelled us. You mocked us. You erased us from your maps. So we made new ones." He looked into the lens. "If you wish to talk, we're listening, but not kneeling." The video ended. The galaxy hadn't exploded. It had shifted, and those who didn't move with it were already being left behind. When regimes feel cornered, they rarely choose humility. They choose purges. Within 2 cycles of the Morrigan incident, the Council declared a new internal directive, Inquest Order 17. Framed publicly as a stability review, it was nothing short of a witch hunt. They weren't targeting the humans. They were targeting us, the ones who questioned too much, hesitated too long, or uttered that most dangerous of words in private corridors: respect. I was summoned for inquiry on a cold-lit morning inside the tribunal wing. I half expected shackles or memory scrubs. Instead, I was met with polite silence and a glass of water that tasted faintly of synthetic lemon, a human affectation, no doubt copied by someone trying to appear neutral. 3 inquisitors sat before me: High Minister Graal of the Kelvari, Speaker Luthen of the Triarch Hive, and, of all beings, Chancellor Omrex himself, the very architect of Earth's expulsion vote. Valjean Kor, Omrex began smoothly, you've become quite the archivist. I'm a diplomat, I replied. Observation is the foundation of peace. And yet your observations increasingly lean toward paranoia. His voice never rose. That was his talent. He could insult you with silk. They showed me intercepted reports, communications I had sent, even private reflections tagged from my secure logs. You describe humanity as organized, Luthen buzzed. Dangerous, efficient. Yes, I said, because they are. Graal leaned forward. Are you suggesting Earth poses an existential threat to the Council? I'm suggesting the Council has become irrelevant to Earth, I corrected, which may, in time, become the same thing. That didn't go over well. I was dismissed with no formal censure, no charges, just the quiet assurance that my travel authorizations would be temporarily suspended for safety. That evening, I received a covert message from a colleague, or former colleague, stationed at the diplomatic relay in Vintari sector. It had no encryption. That was the message. They're not spying on us. We're spying on ourselves, and they know it. The next day, Vintari relay went dark. No attack. No evidence. Just off. The Council blamed data corruption. But I knew better. The humans were watching, yes, but only because we gave them so much to see. We were unraveling from the inside. Terrified, not of Earth's fleets, but of its influence. Their strength wasn't measured in weapons. It was measured in mirrors. They were holding one up to the Council, and the reflection was ugly. Later I visited the archives, not the official ones, the deep records. Hidden layers built over generations by those who knew one day the questions would matter more than the answers. There, I found a recording, dated nearly 100 cycles ago. A human, older, speaking in one of their many Terran dialects, addressing a planetary forum. You don't kill an empire with guns. You kill it by making it irrelevant. You build a better version next door and leave the door open. I stared at the screen for a long time. The door wasn't just open. It was inviting. The declaration didn't come with a parade. It came with a press release. That's what made it worse. I was seated in my quarters, sipping synthroot tea and rereading Harrow's older speeches, searching, perhaps, for a sign this had all been planned decades in advance, when the announcement dropped across the diplomatic spectrum. From Earth Diplomatic Corps, United Charter Communication Division subject, formal notice of status transition. It began with a summary of the Charter's expansion, 37 signatory species, 326 independent systems, shared infrastructure projects spanning 5 galactic arms. And then, in 12 calmly worded paragraphs, they did what empires usually scream into existence with weapons and banners. They declared themselves sovereign, the Terran Concord. Not an empire, not a federation. A concord, a unity of choice, not conquest. Their words were deliberately clinical. Shared governance structure, non-hierarchical enforcement clauses, mutual economic protections. But I could see it. Buried beneath the diplomacy was the core of something ancient and terrifying. Order by invitation. That same day, 5 member species of the Council announced referendums to withdraw. The Triarch Hive claimed neutrality. The Valari submitted a petition for realignment. Even the Kareth, the species Harrow once winked at, issued a single-line communique: "We stand where respect is returned." The Council erupted in chaos. Not war, meetings, dozens, frantic, angry, pointless. No one knew who to blame. Some demanded sanctions. Others called for rearmament. The Krasian military elite, what remained of them, openly called for a precautionary first strike, ignoring the silence that followed the last one. No votes passed. Too many abstained. Too many were afraid. I sat in a nearly empty chamber 2 rotations later, watching the map re-render itself in real time. One color fading, another growing. I didn't recognize half the names. New factions, new voices, but always, they included one common line in their founding declarations: in strategic alliance with the Terran Concord. And still, Earth hadn't fired a single official shot. The Council had expelled them, and they'd thanked us by evolving beyond us. I tried contacting Harrow, not to accuse, not even to beg, just to ask, how? The message never bounced back. It never arrived either. But someone or something replied 2 days later. A small handwritten note appeared on my desk. No courier, no record. It read, "You taught us the cost of belonging. We decided to build something that doesn't need permission. No threats, no demands, just the truth." And the truth, as I had feared all along, was this: we weren't at war with humanity. We were at war with their example. And we were losing. It ended with applause, not for the Council, for its dissolution. The final session convened inside the Chamber of Accord, a name that had long since become ironic. There were only 17 delegates present, out of a body that once numbered over 100. Half of them showed up via delayed transmission. One arrived out of morbid curiosity. I came because I needed to see it die with my own eyes. The vote was swift and unanimous. Even Chancellor Omrex, whose smugness had become skeletal from stress, didn't argue. Motion: to suspend all functions of the Galactic Council pending restructuring. The legal phrasing was neat, cold, like a corpse dressed for a diplomatic funeral. There were no cameras, no media, just one attendant who quietly marked the decision and packed away the seal that had once symbolized unity. No one cried. No one fought. Empires rarely explode. They collapse in silence. I lingered in the corridor, expecting perhaps to feel loss or rage. But what I felt, more than anything, was relief, like exhaling after holding one's breath for a century. The galaxy had already moved on. This chamber had simply caught up. In the weeks that followed, reports flooded in, not of rebellion, but reorganization. Former council races were meeting without us. New coalitions formed, hosted from Terran Concord relays. Trade routes resumed. Disputes were arbitrated, not by Earth, by the species Earth had empowered to speak for themselves. That was the true brilliance of their design. They didn't centralize power. They distributed it. The Terran Concord didn't send fleets to enforce order. It sent engineers, mediators, scientists, artists. I attended a forum on Bastion Station 3, where a Mayan sculptor sat beside a Xeraxi mathematician and a Terran linguist. They weren't debating policy. They were building a shared calendar. Think of that. In all the Council's long reign, we never managed to agree on a galactic date system. Earth fixed it in 3 rotations. Back on my homeworld, the Zetarii elders debated whether we should remain neutral or reclaim leadership. Leadership of what? There was no galaxy left to lead. I received another message that evening, this time not handwritten. It was a secure invitation, a summit aboard Concord Prime, the Terran Concord's new diplomatic station. The note was polite. "You have seen much, observed honestly. That is rare. We would welcome your presence, not as a delegate, as a witness." There was no threat behind the words, no arrogance, just recognition. They were not offering power. They were offering perspective. I stared at the stars outside my window and finally asked myself the question I had avoided for cycles. What would have happened if we had simply listened? Not ruled, not corrected, just listened. Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. But now, the question was irrelevant. The Council had tried to exile Earth from history, and Earth responded by writing its own. I arrived at Concord Prime during its 2nd solar cycle. It floated in quiet orbit over a neutral star, not Earth, not even Sol. A deliberate choice, a symbolic reminder that this place wasn't the center of power. It was merely a point of contact. The station's design was unmistakably human, sturdy, functional, elegant, without ornament. Not a temple, a tool. Its corridors bustled not with security but with scholars. Messengers, interpreters, engineers with grease on their uniforms and translators laughing over shared meals. I had expected a palace. I found a workshop. I was greeted not by guards, but by a Terran named Wren Halley, civilian liaison, she called herself. No title, no rank, just purpose. "We're glad you came," she said, and she meant it. They didn't ask for my credentials. They didn't scan my diplomatic clearance. I was simply welcomed. And I realized then, this was the foundation of it all. Not fear, not control, trust. We passed by a central chamber filled with multi-species panels, discussing everything from economic bandwidth to interstellar soil compatibility. Some debates were passionate, others humorous, none hostile, and at no point did Earth override a single voice. I asked Halley if Elias Harrow was here. She shook her head. "He's home, teaching at a university. He never wanted to lead." I paused. "Then who's in charge?" She smiled. "Of what?" That was when it clicked. There was no throne, no supreme chancellor, no singular Terran overlord ruling from a command bridge. The Terran Concord wasn't designed to be led. It was designed to endure. We stood at a viewport overlooking a launch bay where 3 new ships prepared for deep void missions. Each bore different symbols. One Zithari, one Valari, one Terran. None bore flags. "Do you still think you were expelled?" she asked softly. "No," I replied. "I think we were invited to leave." Halley nodded, then said something I still haven't forgotten. "You feared us because you thought we were trying to become what you were. We feared ourselves because we thought that's all we could become." And yet, they had chosen differently. Not peace through intimidation, not dominance through expansion, but structure through collaboration. Later, I was given a moment to speak to the assembly, not as a representative, just as Valjean Corps, a witness, an archivist. I told them the truth, that we had underestimated humanity not because of their weapons or their will, but because of their restraint. "We exiled them thinking we'd silence them," I said. "But Earth did not vanish. It waited, and then it offered something we never thought to give. A better way." I closed by saying the words I had never dared to say aloud in the council chamber. "Earth stands alone not because it must, but because it chose to, until we were ready to stand beside it." And then I sat down. There was no applause, just quiet, understanding. And for the first time in many rotations, I believed the galaxy might be okay, because the most dangerous species we had ever known had chosen not to dominate the stars. They had chosen to guide them,